Good morning, everyone. Appreciate you all being here today. I'd like to kick off today with a public awareness campaign we've launched to coincide with the executive order I issued yesterday. We need to spread the word about coronavirus and its impacts. As members of the media, I know you understand the incredible importance of informing the public about COVID-19. Thank you for the vital work you are doing on this front. We are continuing to explore ways to communicate with all Oregonians about this pandemic. I can't underscore how important it is that people understand how serious the disease is and how their actions have a real impact on saving lives and protecting one another. The public awareness campaign is being coordinated by OHSU, Oregon Health Sciences University, and OHA, Oregon Health Authority, to get the word out about how people can stay safe, protect others, and what we can do to help each other as we navigate this new way of life. We are developing content to share on social media channels, that's my challenge, social media channels every day, and to send out press release, we sent out a press release yesterday afternoon with a link to these materials. I want to encourage all Oregonians to share this content and would encourage your news organizations to join the effort. Thank you so much for your willingness to partner. Moving to PPE, personal protective equipment. In good news, yesterday we received a truck delivery of equipment from the national stockpile, and we expect to receive another today. We are still taking inventory, but we believe this should amount to about 25% of our requested PPE from the national stockpile. Yesterday's shipment included 87,000 procedural masks, nearly 9,000 gowns, and 14,000 gloves. This is an issue my administration continues to focus on because it's critically important to protect the health and safety of our healthcare workers, our public safety workers, and others. One more update, the Oregon Medical Board has put into effect emergency rules aimed to increase access to healthcare during this critical time. That includes clearing the way for retired physicians and physicians' assistants to work in more than a volunteer capacity. There are about 800 providers in this category. Doctors working in a temporary capacity are now not limited to the 240 days a year under the temporary rule, opening up another potential 500 providers to help with our response. And doctors who've switched to administrative licenses only can more simply reactivate their licenses. That applies to about 3,000 doctors in the state. We obviously don't expect all of these providers to return to active practice, but these changes should help remove administrative barriers in the future. So with that, I'm happy to open it up for questions, and Charles is corralling you telephonically.
Yes, and just a reminder for everyone to hit 0 so that you can speak to the operator. It sounds like some people are having some trouble connecting today, so if you aren't able to connect, please email your question to Nikki Fisher, and we'll try to get to it in line. First up, we've got Claire Withacombe from the Statesman Journal. Go ahead, Claire.
Hi, Governor. I had a question about your order barring evictions for non-payment of rent. I wondered, and I don't know if you can answer this question specifically, but I wondered if there is any kind of restriction on tenants having that as an option. I'm hearing about landlords who are telling tenants that they have to provide proof that they were laid off or their hours were reduced as a result of the coronavirus, and I wondered if you could speak to that.
Look, the spirit of the order was to prohibit evictions for the next 90 days. These are unprecedented times. This is a global pandemic. There is no playbook here, and I am asking landlords to find room in their hearts to not evict Oregonians over the next 90 days.
Okay. I'm also hearing about landlords who are saying that it could affect tenants' rental history if they don't pay rent on time.
That issue has not been raised to me. We'll take a look at it, and maybe somebody on my team can get back to you later today. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Next, we'll go to Dan, I think, with Coin. 1 second.
With the president yesterday saying we need to make sure the cure cannot be worse than the problem itself, if you run into a battle of wills with the president over what can be open and what cannot be open, what authority do you have against his authority?
Well, honestly, you know that I am not always very aligned with the president, and particularly on this particular comment. But the reason why we did our executive order the way we did is I am wanting to save lives and protect people's livelihoods. And I am not interested in unnecessarily closing down businesses and taking away jobs if we don't need to do that. So the goal of my executive order was to balance those competing demands. And, while I don't agree with what the president said and how he said it, I think that's what he was trying to say.
Great. Thanks, Dan. We're going to go next to one of our written questions from Jess Burns in OBB. Jess asks, since an end date wasn't put on the stay-at-home order, what is the criteria you are using to know when to end stay home?
Look, we don't know the answer to that question. There is a lot of uncertainty right now. We are all dealing with both in our individual lives and in our professional lives, and frankly, not only in Oregon, but across the world with a lot of uncertainty. It's really, really hard. I made the decision based on information that I got from hospitals, both the association and individual hospitals, on epidemiologists and physicians. And I assume when they give us the all clear, we'll move forward and certainly consider lifting the order.
Great. Next up, we've got Jonathan Bach from the Business Journal. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hey, Governor Brown. I am looking to see, I just saw a report in the Oregonian that a session may be called next week. Can you confirm that that's the plan at this point? And if so, sort of what are we trying to fast track during that session? Is there specific legislation like this bailout package that the task force is kind of trying to wind up?
So I think folks are targeting next week. I don't think it has been confirmed in terms of a date and that week for certain. My focus on a special session is to make sure that we have adequate resources in a SPA, special purpose appropriation, for COVID-19 response. Roughly in the neighborhood of $250 million. I believe there also needs to be additional resources in the E-Fund. Our fire season is not too far away, and we need to have the resources, for example, in the E-Fund to be able to transfer dollars directly to the Department of Forestry should there be a challenging fire season. And then there are some policy changes that we need to make sure that we can that we have the tools we need to tackle the COVID-19 response. And obviously, I'm supportive of taking care of Oregonians' most urgent needs. The bottom line, however, is that we have far more needs than we have resources. And as you are well aware, the economy is tumbling down, and we don't know what that will look like until we have the May forecast mid-May. So I am also cautioning legislators to be extremely fiscally prudent.
Just as a quick follow-up, how much potential does this have to really mangle the budgets of agencies that also serve, just vulnerable populations like DHS, the child welfare system, OHA in the long term. I know everybody's feeling the pain right now, but is that something that you're really trying to, again, balance?
Yes, I am gravely concerned about our ability to deliver basic services over the next 6 months to a year, given the drop in revenues. And that's why I am encouraging the legislature to be extremely fiscally prudent. For example, I've been working very closely to implement the recommendations of Alvarez and Marcel, the fix-up team that came in to tackle our child welfare system. It is going to be really challenging over the next few months to get the resources needed to implement those recommendations. I just have to be upfront with people.
Thanks, Jonathan. We'll go next to Dick Hughes. Dick, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you just fine, Dick.
Okay. Senator Steiner Haywood said at the Legislative Committee this morning that tomorrow is the deadline for making the decision on whether the Department of Revenue will delay tax, April 15th tax deadline in any way. I wanted to confirm whether that is the deadline for the decision to be made and what the status is of your thinking on that.
So that is my understanding of the deadline. I need to talk to, I received the information yesterday, need to talk to some folks today, but we'll be making the decision relatively quickly.
Does relatively quickly mean we should expect an announcement today?
I am at this point in my life not giving any deadlines or time frames, but I would say sometime in the next 48 hours. How's that, Dick?
Understandable. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dick. Next, we'll go to Lauren Dake with OPV. Go ahead, Lauren.
Hi, Governor. I was wondering if you could give us an update on what specifically is being done to add hospital beds, in addition to the 250 extra beds that are happening out at the fairgrounds, particularly in rural areas. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lauren. So the Joint Task Force is doing that work, and they are looking at available properties that could serve as, if not hospital beds, as a lower level of care for folks coming out of the hospital but need to be quarantined. So they are collating that information in both, frankly, urban Oregon and rural Oregon. And the data around hospital beds, that is being collated as well. And we hope to have those numbers in the next 5 days. We're working very hard to get sooner than that. But we hope to have the systems aligned and the numbers out there. I just want to say thank you to all the Oregonians who have either emailed or phoned in information about, I'll just say, properties that might be available in short order. It's a pretty wide and creative list, not too surprising, from Wapato to Merrillhurst to Hillcrest and Salem to Eastern Oregon University dorms. So we're looking at all over the state, and I also appreciate organizations like Mercy Corps stepping up with, I'll just say, pop-up facilities.
All right. Thanks, Lauren. We'll go next to a written question from Kelsey at KVAL in Eugene. Governor, they say, we've noticed construction work is continuing at Hayward Field. There seems to be many people working on this project. Could you tell me if this is legal under the stay-at-home order?
So we wanted to do an executive order that works for Oregon, and the spirit of the executive order is really clear. If you cannot operate safely, you need to close. And what that means is obviously the 6 feet of social distancing, telecommuting, that probably doesn't work on a construction site, but they also have equipment from masks and helmets that should provide a layer of protective gear. You didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you this. My understanding is the Olympics for the 2020 have been delayed a year. So I would anticipate we'll hear an announcement about delay of the World Athletic Games as well.
Great, thanks. The next person here, I didn't get your name, but it looks like it's Blair from Pamplin. Go ahead.
Oh, it's Blair from the Mercury, I think.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Great.
All right. I was just wondering what is being done right now to ensure workplaces that aren't public-facing, such as like small offices, are complying with remote work and social distancing rules.
So I'm asking both business owners and employees to take these requirements very, very seriously. And for employees that feel like they are not being protected, they should call the employment department and express their concerns. I also, I can't have police in every single law office or every single business office around the state of Oregon. I am asking people to take personal responsibility and act with consideration for your employees and for your customers.
Thanks, Blair. We'll go next to one of our written questions here. Adele at Coin asks, President Trump said that he will be opening everything back up in 2 weeks, but if Governor Brown thinks we need to stay at home, how do we proceed and who supersedes?
That's a really good question. I honestly don't know what the president's legal authority is to supersede my executive order, and I will have our legal team do a little research and get back to you. What I would say is, with all due respect to the president, my priority is keeping Oregonians safe and making sure that we are ensuring that we protect Oregon lives and Oregon livelihoods. When I was on the phone with him earlier this week, he clearly said that these difficult decisions are in the hands of governors, so I would expect that it stay that way.
And next up, we'll go to another written question from Cassandra at OPB. She asks, can you provide an update on the state's contract with Quest to provide additional testing? What other updates can you provide about Oregon's capacity to test for COVID-19 statewide?
Cassandra, I can't, other than we know that testing capacity is gradually expanding statewide. The president did okay the use of the Defense Production Act in terms of both testing kits and ventilators. And we have at least a handful of private sector partners and hospital partners that are providing testing in Oregon at this time. However, it is still focused on those in priority populations, our healthcare workers, public safety workers, as well as those showing symptoms of the coronavirus.
And we'll go next to another written question. This one is from Jillian with the AP. Governor Brown, can you please talk more about the challenges facing rural hospitals in Oregon? How well are they staffed in terms of doctors? Do you know how many rural beds there are compared to urban hospital beds? And are there any projections about how badly COVID-19 could hit in rural areas?
So here's what I do know in terms of our hospital beds. We'll have the collated numbers of hospital beds later this week, as well as how many beds statewide, as well as the different levels of care, acute care, critical care, and ventilator care. The reason why I got a lot of pushback from rural Oregon about issuing the executive order, but the reason why I moved forward on it is because while there are relatively few cases in eastern Oregon, we know that rural Oregon has very limited hospital capacity and very few medical personnel. And that's why, frankly, I was so frustrated when so many, I'll say, Oregonians, Washingtonians, and Californians went to the Oregon coast. It's a more vulnerable population. The population tends to be a bit older, and they don't have, frankly, the medical capacity that we have, for example, in Portland, Eugene, or Salem. And so that's why I felt strongly about issuing a statewide order, that we are all in this together, and that we all need to look out for one another, and obviously very concerned about rural Oregon and doing everything we can to strengthen the rural health care capacities right now.
Great. And just a reminder to folks to please press 0 to talk to the operator. I know some folks are having technical difficulties, so we'll just keep taking written questions. If you've been waiting for a while and you have a Kansas area code with your number ending in 6713, go ahead.
Hi, Charles. It's Mila from KGW. Apologies for the Kansas number. So, Governor, I have two questions. The first is, what is your message to healthcare workers who are reusing their PPE and who are worried that they might be getting sick right now? And then next is, do you expect to come out with a more, clear plan of what employees need to be working, who can't be working? I know in Washington, the governor there created a 14-page document with details about every industry, every job. So will there be more clarity in that department?
So in response to your first question, I have been very, very clear in my executive order. If you can't maintain 6 feet of social distancing, if you can't teleconference, if you cannot provide your customers with a takeout option, you must shut down. We also provided a list of specific businesses from, this is the one I know that many of us are struggling with, hair salons, to movie theaters, to climbing gyms, etc. So obviously, once we see additional modeling data this week and into next week, if we need to be more restrictive around businesses, we will. If we hear there is widespread noncompliance, that would obviously be a consideration to me. But it is critically important that we can both protect people's lives, protect people's health, and protect their livelihoods. And I think we can do both. I know we can do both under the order I have set forth. In terms of healthcare workers, we are so incredibly grateful to all of the healthcare workers across the state. As I just mentioned earlier, we've got retired folks who are willing to reactivate their licenses. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are literally putting your lives on the line to protect Oregonians, and we are incredibly grateful. I also know you're working really long hours, and this is really hard. I am committing to do everything I can to make sure that you have the personal protective equipment that you need. As I just said, we've received now about 25% of our requests from the federal stockpile. Oregonians across the state have been incredibly gracious about helping us collect additional reserves stateside, and we're going to do everything we can to get up the production of PPE running ASAP.
Thanks, Mila. We've got time for just about 2 more questions, so we're going to go next to Dan with Coin.
Thank you again. Dick Hughes asked about a deadline, and I had phone difficulties. Was that about whether you're extending the April 15th tax deadline? And then also, we're hearing from landlords concerned that they're not going to be able to make their mortgage payments because they're not getting rents. Any relief in sight for those folks?
To answer to your question about mortgage relief, we have sent a directive to mortgage holders and financial institutions. The only authority we have is to request that they delay action for 90 days. We have no other tools. We've made that request to them. We also will be exploring what we can do to help businesses who are holding leases as well. And the other part of your question was, I have roughly, I think it's 24 hours to consider the tax filing extension. Need to have some additional conversations this afternoon, but we'll have a decision here in the next 36, 48 hours.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. We've got time for one more question. I believe it's being texted to me now. We'll just,
Charles, I just want to know, how did you know that was a Kansas?
Nikki looked it up for us.
Oh.
Just waiting on this last question that's coming through now. One moment. All right, thanks, everyone. So our next question is from Hillary with the Oregonian. She's asking, Governor, you've deferred to other leaders on decision-making. What is your guiding principle in your COVID-19 policies?
Well, I would disagree with the underlying premise. Hillary, as you know, I've been working to take in information from epidemiologists, physicians, public health experts, elected officials from all over the state. My guiding principles are to continue to protect the health and safety of Oregonians and to protect their livelihoods. Our focus is to reduce the transmission while flattening the curve, and we are working, obviously, to do that because we need to make sure that we are expanding hospital bed capacity.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and sorry again for the technical difficulties. We'll be in touch soon, and let us know if you have questions. Thanks.